Welcome to Basement Tales with Sam Jacknin, Charlie Einsmann, Ed Grass, and Sandra Delancy. We have fun telling crazy but true stories about turning the worst possible property disasters into bags of money. Along the way, we'll pass along some important lessons to help you make cash on real estate. Sam and Charlie walked away from cubicle hell 25 years ago. Starting with no property, they created their own Clear Sky group of companies, sold hundreds of houses, bought dozens of rentals, and made millions in hard money loans. I'm Ed, a big firm litigator until muscular dystrophy made me find a hobby other than suing people. I miss it. Sandra's the normal person here with a real job plus some rentals. Her decades of friendship with the group, from office flunkies to property gurus, might help keep us all humble and focused on learning something. I wouldn't count on it.
We have to tell a tale from the basement, though, and I have the tale from the basement.
All right.
Wait. So we need our crazy ass basement tale for the week.
It involves the three of us. So let's say that there was a road called Route 2, and then there was a auto dealer named Auto Dealer, and they had some loans. They had some loans from us.
So these guys, we had a house on Possum Point, and we had just finished renovating it. And of course, we went to sell it, and we had a listing with another broker that was extraordinarily too high. And so we couldn't sell it at a certain price, so we decided to rent it out. So we put it out there for rent, and I met these guys at Possum Point one day to show them around for a rental. So this was also the time where we had just started our hard money business. And so push came to shove, and 5 of these guys show up, right, with the auto finance shirts on. And one of them was like one of the guys from Pulp Fiction. And so he was fidgety. So I was sort of scared for my life because I thought these guys 5-on-1, they were going to kill me.
They throw him in the creek.
Yeah, throw me in the creek. But thank God it was during the day. And so, yeah, they had all these auto finance stories and shirts. And so I asked them, I said, well, as I'm taking them through the house, being a really good retail realtor, I asked him, I said, well, what do you guys do for a living? They go, we own this used auto shop. And I said, okay, that's interesting. How do you guys do it? And they sort of told me their whole business model and how they, finance these cars 100%, and then they make the people pay twice a month. And they came back and told me that they needed a loan on their property to help finance a bigger operation. And I said, we could be your guys. And that's sort of how one of our first Clear Sky Finance hard money loans got started.
So later on, they bought into another lot on the other side of town, and their neighbor put them in a super jam. And so they thought that the best way to get out of it was, as if it was a residential mortgage obligation, they could forestall a foreclosure because of this contract violation that the prior owner had alleged. And so they filed a bankruptcy, even though they didn't have a particularly relevant financial need to file a bankruptcy. They just wanted to slow down a foreclosure. It would have been easier just to deed the property to other people, because they got hung up with a bankruptcy trustee for years in bankruptcy court until she stripped them of maybe 30% of their assets for no reason.
More than that.
And expropriated them for herself. In the end, she got more than $1 million in legal fees. But our loans did get paid off, but it took years. And Ed drove the entire process through to a close.
Well, I was going to say, I think the moral of this, what I learned from this, is the most honest and reasonable people involved in this case were a bunch of used auto dealers. The real problem was the lawyers. The judge was great, but the parties and the lawyers, the used car dealers were the most reputable. So
that's true.
And I was thinking about, this was if we didn't have a topic, my topic was going to be, I hate lawyers. We should have a whole topic at some point on how to deal with lawyers and real estate transactions and get them to do anything and not fleece you. And they're just terrible. I hate lawyers.
So in the process of this one, we picked up another deed of trust on it that was owned by someone else who got Would you say chickened out would describe the
Tired.
word?
I think tired. I mean,
Yeah, I
when
think
you're
tired.
waiting for years to get your money, that's the problem with hard money
I felt like
loans
there was
is-
some chickening in there.
Yeah, and so just to get everybody understanding what we do, this came out of one of our business lines called the hard money business or private lending. And so usually in our hard money business, our maximum loan is a year. And so usually what we do is we lend to fix and flippers, but the maximum loan is a year. This loan was originated October 21st, 2014. And so this was out there for 6 years. And so these guys were supposed to refinance the entire used car lot and just take us out. And so this loan stayed out there for almost exactly 6 years to the day.
They hadn't paid interest to us in how many years?
right. They couldn't.
We collected it all at the time they did the payoff.
Yeah.
Well, for the most part, the funny thing is that they would courier checks to us every single month. So they would pay $50 to bring us a check.
So they go to one closing on a modification and they needed some money. And the guy says, I got some pocket change. And he literally pulls out $20,000 in cash and hands it to the settlement attorney who has a complete heart attack. He's never having encountered a cash closing differential before. It was crazy. There were some fun
Pretty
guys.
funny. And these guys, they were on time for 2014, all of 2015, all of 2016. And then when they purchased this other used car lot, they sort of went off the rails. And that was sort of the middle of 2017. So this thing was performing for a long time.
So they initially started sending like Tiny over to my house. He was like a 600-pound person and who would collect on the vehicles. And Tiny would come and deliver the checks to me at 10 p.m.
It wasn't Tiny on Better Call Saul?
It was like that.
Yeah.
It was like that.
And it was all lawyers. It was all lawyers the one guy who sort of had sold the other lot was difficult, but lawyers.
Plainly dishonest.
Yeah. But we're supposed to, in theory, teach people something. That one is avoid lawyers. Is probably one of the.
Yeah. Don't declare bankruptcy when you don't need one. That, as a business owner, that's probably something you want to avoid.
Yes. Yeah,
it's not a tool. Yeah. It's not a tool for getting out of 3 months of mortgage payments.
And the biggest objective out of this is that if you're in the private lending space, the number one thing that we kind of went wrong on is that you always have to know the exit strategy of the borrower. And so we thought we knew the exit strategy that they were going to refinance out. The problem is that they didn't have the capability to refinance this out.
The thing is, you would think on the surface they did because they had properties with a lot of equity, but sort of why were they coming to us in the first place to get a hard money loan? The whole idea of a hard money loan is hard money loans are based on the asset value. And they're a lot easier to get for that reason. If you have a property, it's worth a lot of money. But then to get a regular loan, then you have to go back and do all the documentation and show the income. And so for a business, you really have to have your bookkeeping in good shape. I mean, perfectly honest, normal businesses don't often have their bookkeeping in very good shape. So that was, I think, some of their difficulty was to put all that together.
Bookkeeping, what is that?
And then, of course, to do all, again, anybody who's done their own residential house, imagine a business, what you have to show and the time it takes for them to put that together. I think they were perfectly happy. Well, not happy, but they were fine paying a higher interest rate because they just didn't have the time to put together what they needed. They were busy making money. They were very good at their business.
Yeah, that's true. The other thing was that under no circumstances was a normal bank even going to put a second trust on a commercial property. And so the banks and the other lending institutions not only didn't understand the commercial property, they didn't understand the business. And so one of the things that we had to understand is, why are these guys going to pay such an extraordinary interest rate to us? So one afternoon, Sam and myself actually went into their offices and sat down with them and went over their entire auto financing business process. And we couldn't believe the rate of return that they were making on these auto finance loans. And so they needed the money to expand their business. And the light bulb went on. We were like, oh my gosh, these guys are making a ton of money. There is no way in heck that they're going to default on our loans.
No.
We're in. So
they were making 35% returns on the money that they loaned out. So their strategy was to sell a car at a value point. Like, they wouldn't sell it to you if you wanted to buy it in cash. They'd sell it to you very inexpensively, but then the interest rate is quite high. And so the cars were designed to go to a demographic that needed an extremely reliable vehicle, and they couldn't get financing anywhere else. So
yeah, and so for you guys out there, the interest rate was a legal interest rate. What Sam is talking about is the return on the money goes up because on top of the interest rate that they were charging, they were able to charge other fees, like an application fee, a credit
$1,000.
Yeah, all these other fees that they were charging. They even charged what's called a GPS fee, a locator fee. So all these fees, helped them with their greater return, but the interest rate they charged was under the letter of the law. So we had a good idea of the valuation of the property, and even though we were in, at the time, second trust position, we originated another loan in third trust position, but we knew the property inside and out. We knew how much the property could be sold, at an auction scenario or to a third party buyer. So we had our ducks in a row with that. And just as importantly, we also understood their business model. We knew exactly how much money they were making, how they were making it, and they just wanted to expand their enterprises. And so when we went down there that day to understand their business, I mean, their lot was teeming with vehicles. I mean, they couldn't fit enough cars on that lot. And so they still needed money to expand. So we were like, oh, we're in.
Well, this is typical for this group. So obviously, Charlie raised a couple topics. Clearly, today's topic is going to be hard money loans. So maybe we should talk about, the traditional fix and flip hard money loan, which, Charlie, that's most of what you do, right? In terms of the loans.
Yeah, that's pretty much all we do. And so what we've done is we've created what's called a niche market to where the normal banks cannot lend into it. They're not set up for it. So when I say a normal bank, I'm talking about twofold, right? The first set of banks are your Wells Fargo's, your SunTrust, your Banks of America, the banks that do all those kinds of things. And the other set of banks that I'm referring to are the community banks, the smaller banks that are in your area. And what these guys aren't set up to do is a niche that we're filling in the marketplace, and that's called asset-based lending. And so what that means is that we will lend on the value of an asset first and foremost. So what we do is, in our case, we do a fix and flip loan. We take the value of the asset at its best potential use. And in this case, if it's a house, it's its fixed up use. So that's called the after repair value. So what we do is we lend on a percentage of the after repair value. And not only do we do that, we also lend a lot of money on the loan to cost side as well. And so between these two contributing factors, we're enabled to create a loan around a fix and flip project that no other institution will create, because we're going to be more capital intensive. So we're going to lend more money than anybody else is going to be able to do. And the reason behind that is because we're familiar with the underlying asset. So if we have to take it back, we'll just take it back and execute on that asset. But we don't want to do that because we're just in business to make rate, term, and points. And so that's sort of the niche that we have filled out there in the business community. And the other thing that these banks can't do is they cannot close in a week or less. So most of these fix and flip deals need to be closed in a week or less. And so these guys can't do it. We don't really have any credit check as part of our process. We don't have any income checks. We certainly don't look at tax returns. We don't look at business returns. We don't look at any of those things. We basically make a decision based on the project and the asset itself.
Let's hypothetically say I'm a scumbag lawyer, not a very good scumbag lawyer. So I make a little money. Maybe I've got $5,000 or $10,000, and I find out somebody down the street, needs to sell some beaten up old property, and I want to buy that. I would think I got to go to my bank, but my bank doesn't really like me. How do I find a hard money lender? I mean, until I met you guys, I'd never really heard much about this. You've got a line on a property you want to buy, but you need money fast. Who do you call? How do you find it?
Well, for us and anybody else listening to this, the best place to do it really is with the American Association of Private Lenders, AAPL, because what you want to do is the most important thing in searching for a hard money lenders that you need a reputable lender. And so these lenders on the AAPL website have been vetted out by AAPL. So you need a vetted lender, because the other thing that you have to understand is in the hard money space, I would say 8 out of 10 people that are calling themselves hard money lenders really aren't hard money lenders. They're not asset-based lenders. So I would start there. The next thing I would do, obviously, is I would go on the internet and search. But once you do that, though, one of the most important things that you need to do is, once you find the website of somebody calling themselves a private lender, you want to go to their website to see if they have a testimonial section, because that is the most important part, is a testimonial section. And so if you can do those two things, that would probably be the best ways to at least begin your search for a private lender or hard money lender. Sam, you got anything to add to that?
No, I think that's great. If it's not a website that you're going to for reference, it's just a friend who's in the business, and then ask them who they've used. If you're in a community, people that are doing flips do know who that is. They know how, collections work. They know how responsive they are for draw requests. I mean, if you're working with a national lender, you got to be really sure they're going to be ready for you on a draw request, especially even if your loan is brokered locally and funded nationally. That can be a real problem. Honestly, when I had talked to our borrowers, I'll see if they're about the 10th day of the month, if they're running a little late on their payment. I'll give them a call. I say, hey, we are right on time when you ask for a draw. So, provide the same courtesy for us with our payments. So having a local lender who's, and you can call, that's important. I mean, that's the number one thing right there, because these projects can become quite complex. 8 out of 10 of them are not, but those other two have some variations. You need some extra money, or you need some advice, something comes up, a delay happens, you need someone you can talk to.
Yeah, and I don't know, Ed, how much time you had on your example, but let's say you have a lot of time to purchase that first house. One of the things that I would also recommend is that you attend your local, I'm going to call it REIA, REIA, or REIG. And so what that means is, a REIA is a Real Estate Investment Association. So in your local area, I'm sure there's a ton of meetups that you could go to, either in person or virtual online. And in those meetups, you can definitely not only meet maybe a couple of hard money lenders, but you could get referrals for hard money lenders. Now, I also mentioned this other thing called REIG. That stands for Real Estate Investment Group. And so the differentiator between a real estate investor association and a real estate investor group is that at the national level, the real estate investor associations all have a national body that they all report to, whereas a real estate investment group is just a collection of like-minded investors. So what I would do is I would sort out your local REIAs and your local REIGs and plug into those meetups. In our area, which we're coming from Northern Virginia, if you wanted to, you could literally plug into a REIA or REIG every night of the week, Monday through Thursday, 4 weeks out of the month, there's meetups going on. So you could plug in there. And the other thing that you might want to look at too is, who is the hard money lender sponsoring these groups? And though that should tell you a lot as well. And that should just tell you a lot on their reputation, because if a hard money lender is sponsoring various REIAs or various REIGs, and that should tell you that not only they put money into their local area, but their odds are they're a reputable lender, because if they weren't a reputable lender, they wouldn't be sponsoring these groups.
Right. You don't want to get out there and not represent yourself correctly and then be at a meetup every week and see the same people. We have great success when we've sponsored local REIA, and the people we know, we have a great network of folks that keep coming back. It's wonderful.
So I'm going to piggyback off of Ed's question, and one of the many hats that I wear in this little group here is a voice of the people that, might be inheriting a property or something. Grandma, met, an unfortunate demise, but, now I own her property. And I've learned a lot about, or I've heard a lot about, investors making money, fixing and flipping and buying properties and flipping. How would I, as a new investor, would you recommend that I, as a new real estate investor, try to, do something with a fix and flip of this, this property? Do I go to a hard money lender? Sounds like you're saying that, I should first of all get involved with a RIA, find a local RIA to at least learn something about what to do. But would you recommend that I try to, undertake an endeavor like this? What do I do? What would you recommend that I do? Do I just kind of?
Well, I think Charlie's first suggestion of the network is critical, right? You get involved with a network of folks that are doing this already, and look for referrals. So you're looking for a lender maybe to give you money to a renovation loan, even though you own the house, and then you're looking for contractors. So you got to get to a network of people who have a good range of experience.
Do you think it's a good idea? I mean, should somebody like that, maybe they're better off just trying to sell the house wholesale or as is, and can they make money that way? Well, in your experience, how many people come in that are relatively less experienced like that and successfully flip a house? Do you see people come in that are very inexperienced and are able to do okay? Because obviously, that if you can do it, you're going to make more money that way.
Yeah, and this house needs some work. It's been neglected for a while. Grandma didn't take care of it. So, I mean, the roof and the gutters and things are falling off of it. And
so the answer to all these questions, right? Sandra's first question, are they in over their head? And so the answer is yes, no doubt about it. They're in over their head. And so also responding to Ed is that in our experience, we do these type of deals 3 to 6 times a year. So we see this all the time. And so one of the things that we provide is we provide access to our contractor network. And so that's very, very important, especially for somebody in that situation, because when they're borrowing money from us, we give them, matter of fact, we sort of kind of want them to use our contractor network. And so in the cases where this has happened and they've used us and they've used our contractor network, it's been an absolute gold mine for the end user who inherited this house, because they can certainly wholesale it. But if they do wholesale it, they're not going to make as much money. And so I could just list a bunch of addresses that these guys would get mad at me if I did, of people that have absolutely killed it by using our financing, but they've also used our contractors. And we have a couple deals within DC right now that are on the same thing where they've inherited the property. Now, the good thing for us is that once they inherited the property, as long as the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed in the legality of the estate, usually the asset is owned outright, free and clear. So the asset is going to stand upon itself. And so all we're doing really is lending them the renovation costs, but the renovation costs, if the property is in full disrepair, can be anywhere from, $100,000 to $250,000. But if they have access to a good contractor network, which odds are they probably don't, which is why they're in over their head, then these kinds of assets stand on themselves. But again, we can provide them with the contractors, and usually, 9.5 times out of 10, this is a big success, and they're absolutely thrilled. We had a property in Northern Virginia where the guy inherited the property with 3 brothers and sisters. And so he was one of 4. But what we did is we helped him acquire the property because the brothers and sisters agreed to a nice, smaller amount to buy the house. So we gave him money to purchase the property, buy his brothers and sisters out of the house. And then he was the one that was going to fix and flip the house. And we already knew the renovation budget. So in that scenario, all the criteria were met in our numbers. And so this guy came out with a big success.
Well, that's I think the issue about experience with the rebuild cost is critical. I mean, anybody like Sandra, like me, we need a plumber or need a roof replaced. You get a couple estimates and they just vary enormously. I've seen Sam, and of course you too, Charlie, say, well, that's going to be 10,000 for this, 15,000 for that. That'll be 110,000, and you guys are always spot on. I mean, within a couple $1,000s, and and you'll usually say, but when they open up a wall and you find like a beehive, which I know you've had happen, that may change your cost a little bit. But that to me is probably the hardest thing, is to figure out how to get a contractor, how not to get fleeced by a contractor, and also how to make the house look nice for the current market. And you guys have that piece too. You started as regular brokers, right?
Yeah. So that's where we got our start, opening doors, showing houses. It's a long time ago now.
So if
Just
I were
like
to
the,
try to do this myself, I can take advantage of your contractor network, is what you're saying.
Yeah.
Or I could wholesale it to you. That's number two.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Okay, those are some options. Doesn't sound like it's as bad as I thought it was.
How bad? Well, let me ask you this. Are there bad lenders out there that are just hoping to default you and steal your property? You hear those scams where lenders come along and try to give an older person a home equity loan, and then they charge them $50,000 to do a $5,000 roof renovation, or even if they don't do that, they just try to default people. Is there a lot of that out there, or is that kind of
Yeah, there's a pretty good
largely
variety of folks out there doing
scams?
In our region, which is large, millions of people, there are probably only 3 or 4 lenders that do asset-based loans. So I recommend looking for one of those folks.
Of
Your community.
legitimate, right?
Yeah.
yeah, and
And
then the other way too, there's a second way too that I didn't talk about now is I talked about earlier the American Association of Private Lenders. The next biggest association that's nationwide is called the National Private Lenders Association, NPLA, and those guys are out there as well. And so there's people involved with that, lenders too. But and the difference between NPLA and AAPL is that AAPL is going to have a lot more asset-based lenders, whereas the NPLA is going to have a lot more nationwide correspondent lenders who do things like check credit, they check income. They're not strictly asset-based lenders. They do a combination of both, and they're going to make you put a lot more money down on your projects. So whereas our loan to cost is 90 to 95% loan to cost, their loan to cost is going to be down around 75%.
so they're, as I understand it, they're sort of in between a hard money asset based, where you Charlie and Sam really largely only care about, is there enough equity in the property to protect the loan? But these people are, you're saying they're running credit reports, are they getting your tax returns? Like, what is it, almost like a full document loan like a bank, or is it a little less?
It's right in between. It's right in the middle. It's a lot less it's a lot less documentation from a bank, but it's a lot more documentation from a hard money lender. And so the other pitfall too with those guys is that they can't close in less than 2 weeks. It's going to take them at least 2 weeks to close. Most of them could get it done in 10 days, but it's going to take them 2 weeks or longer because their handshaking processes are a lot more, their documentation collection process is a lot more extensive than a true asset-based lender.
Charlie's so grim. He's so grim.
This is what our listeners and Charlie Grass, my son's doing the audio. Keep this part in. Like Charlie actually, Charlie Einsmann is actually a very funny guy. Except here, I feel he's like a little bit of an undertaker, talking about, selling you a very nice coffin.
I almost feel like getting out of the business when I hear how he.
Yeah, but look, that's not true. I'm still, no. I'm still upset. I'm still upset at Ed when Ed went for the hidden things in houses, and he's talking about a beehive. I mean, Ed didn't even bring up the bones.
Okay.
He didn't bring up the bones. He brings up a freaking beehive podcast, and we've got a couple houses that have bones in them.
All right. Now I'll have you know, we did call the police, and they investigated it thoroughly.
That's Basement Tales for this week. Thanks, everybody. I'll be scrubbing the end of this podcast to make sure there's no reference to bodies.
Yeah.
Okay, guys, as your lawyer.
Ed is trying to keep it to, legal.
Remember, I didn't say bodies. I just said bones. Okay.
Well, isn't bones a body?
You were not responsible for the bones being there.
What, did you find an arm? What do you mean no body? What are you talking about?
Oh my gosh.
Next week.
All right. Next week on Basement Tales.
Thanks, Sandra.
I'm still, no. I'm still upset. I'm still upset at Ed when Ed went for the hidden things in houses, and he's talking about a beehive. I mean, Ed didn't even bring up the bones.